It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I will be your host this morning. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you on board. Hope you're catching us live on our website. If not, I hope you're catching us live on Patriot FB. And of course, there's plenty of other ways to catch America's Voice Now. We have a listen line that's open 24/7. You can listen live, or you can catch a pre-recorded version or the recorded version for that day anytime by simply dialing area code 415-325-0725. That number is given to us by Audio Now, and they provide a service that is radio over your phone. How awesome is that? So if you are a traveler, you'd like to listen to America's Voice Now, you can certainly do that. 415-325-0725. So we're going to try to hit on a few different issues this morning. It's all over the news in reference to the CIA and the Senate Oversight Committee. And so we're going to talk about that in two segments in our last portion of this morning. And I think it's important that we evaluate and analyze exactly what that is, because I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if ever there was an issue that expressed the level of the constitutional crisis we are in as a nation, this be it. It's bad enough that we have an executive that is completely out of control and that is operating in a lawless fashion. But when you have the CIA spying on the Oversight Committee that is charged with monitoring it and verifying that it is operating legally, and they are breaking the law and violating the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution and executive orders to do so, we have a rogue agency on our hands and a government completely out of control. Our first segment this morning is going to be the Obama immigration policy and how it is fraught with such lies and misinformation, because one of the things that you keep hearing is that this administration is strong on rejecting and deporting immigrants. Well, it all came out yesterday in another hearing in which Jay Johnson, the new chief of DHS, exposed the truth. It's all a lie, and it's more treason, and I'm going to explain to you how the word treason plays in. He claims he's the toughest in history on the border. However, the way he's counting them, in typical fashion of this administration, boy, who recounts and rejustifies everything they do, he's counting those that they catch at the border. No other president in history has ever done that. He has only counted those caught within the interior of the United States. And so, as a result, illegals that already live in the interior have a 1%, less than 1% chance of being caught. Ladies and gentlemen, the policies that this president is instituting between what his deportation program and his initiation of the DREAM Act, which is completely against the law and completely against Congress's authorized dictates, and it's completely against the Constitution because he's not protecting our borders, is tantamount to treason. And I've got to tell you, we have reached so far down to the bottom of the barrel to scrape the dregs of hell. All right, our second topic is going to be the planet's fiscal crisis is nearing a bubble end. We're going to talk about things that the media is not telling you about. And I'm talking now here about a massive grinding or a massive grinding to a halt of the Chinese shadow banking scheme that's been going on. And you're not aware of it. And the reason you're not aware of it is because the media, the mainstream media, is withholding information from you. And the reason they do that is because they don't want to educate and inform you. They simply choose to entertain you. And I don't know where the shift came from doing their due diligence and doing their job of playing the fourth estate, the watchdog of government. But our media, and this is every media source out there, and it goes all the way from Fox News down to the worst of the worst of MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and NBC, which is perhaps the worst of the bunch. The media has completely and utterly failed to keep us informed of what's going on globally. And it's not just our media, it's the world's media. The markets are holding their breath. China's shadow banking is grinding to a halt. And the media is keeping us numb and pacified with Oscars, garbage, tripe, staged reality shows. The planet's going through the tremors of a global shakeup. Fiscal, political, ethical, moral. The world is in the quake of treason. And I cannot say it loudly enough, strenuously enough, or emphatically enough. I am encouraging you to prepare yourselves, your families, your homes with food, with medicine, with ammunition. I don't know when you're going to need it, but I do know one thing for sure. You're going to need it. So let's jump into our first topic this morning because this is a critical issue. We keep hearing about, well, first of all, recognize that the president constantly declares himself tough on immigrants. Now, we know that's not the truth because he has blatantly, boldly, and illegally given special consideration to immigrants across the board in the United States. And as a result of his efforts, we see the failure to, one, seal our borders, two, the open and blatant abuse of his constitutionally delegated duty to protect and defend the United States from invasion. And whether you choose to agree with it or not, I'm telling you right now that what's happening on our borders is an invasion. Not an armed invasion, but it is an invasion nonetheless. And when we look at the level of abuse that this president has applied to this, and I'm reminded now to bring to your attention the opinion, the op-ed piece from Jonathan Turley, who's an Obama voter and an Obama supporter. He posted an op-ed yesterday in the or March 9th, I should say, in the LA Times, and he's clear at the beginning. He says the president's power grab, and he writes a subtitle, of course, which is Obama is not a dictator. But there is a danger in his aggregation of executive power. And one of the things that he points to, among many others, including the vast abuses under the Obamacare issues, is that he has asked Congress to change the law to exempt certain classes of immigrants, particularly children, who are in the U.S. illegally from deportation. Congress refused to pass the DREAM Act. However, Obama has proceeded to then order agencies under executive orders to effectively guarantee the very same changes that Congress unanimously rejected. I shouldn't say unanimously. Let me stop that. That Congress boldly rejected. Now, he has gone outside of any boundary of the rule of law with that level of limitation on the deportation process, number one. Number two, when you look at the amount of illegals that have been deported under his administration, he does something utterly, totally, and completely dishonest in an attempt to change the public nature of how he is viewed. Let me clarify for you what happened. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, who's recently just taken over the position, on Tuesday, he acknowledged that the deportation numbers that are used by the administration are made up of illegal immigrants, mostly that are caught at the border. Now, the difference between what they're doing now and the number they're giving us, based on how many immigrants they're catching at the border and basically turning right around and ejecting back out, is done with dishonest intent, because every other president in history has not counted that way. What they've counted are only those that they caught in the interior of the country. In other words, the assumption is that if you catch them coming across the border and they're caught at the border, you don't even count those, because those aren't real deportations. Those are rejections. But Obama is not doing that. He's counting those as deportations. And that is intentional, willful dishonesty. He had to admit it because he was in a congressional Senate or panel hearing. And the administration has argued that it's the toughest on illegal immigration out there. But it's more lies. Immigrant right groups are screaming at him because of his claim. But the truth is, he's really not kicking out more immigrants by any stretch of the imagination than prior presidents. Jay Johnson was asked by John Culberson. He's a Texas representative. And he said, he asked Johnson, he said, under the Obama administration, more than half of those removals that were attributed to ICE, which is Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, are actually a result of Border Patrol arrests that wouldn't have counted in prior administrations. Is that correct? And Jay Johnson confirmed it by saying one word: correct. Now, what that tells you is that in reality, the number of deportations under Obama have actually fallen in comparison to Bush, as an example. And don't misunderstand me, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a partisan issue. I am no supporter of Bush. He was a traitor to the nation. He did things to this country, including the Patriot Act and the initial NDAA and many other abusive policies, and his failure to seal and close the borders and prevent the invasion of the United States of America. So this is not some kind of a bombastic support of Bush, not by any stretch of the imagination. Those of you who are longtime listeners, you know that I am no supporter of the Bush administration, and I excoriate him on a routine basis. But I got to tell you, when you do a one-on-one comparison with the period in time for the Bush administration, the numbers are stunning. In 2013, ICE was responsible for about 133,000 of the 368 total immigrants that were removed. Now, the Washington Times has done this article, by the way, is posted in the Washington Times, and there'll be a link to it in the YouTube video. It's also on our website and our Facebook page and Patriot FB and a bunch of other places. The Washington Times has calculated that this means that less than 1% of the illegal immigrants that are already living in the interior of the United States are at risk of being deported. Less than 1%. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beyond a constitutional crisis with a president out of control. We are beyond a constitutional crisis with a president who feels that he can make dictatorial decisions and place executive orders in play that exceed his authority. We are beyond a constitutional crisis with a hand-wringing Congress who is inept, incompetent, and impotent. Impotent to stop him. Inept and incompetent on their own. And when we talk about what's going on with the CIA in our third and fourth segment, holy smokes. The CIA has become a rogue agency. We're going to talk about that in segments 3 and 4, so don't miss that. That's going to be an excellent discussion. In fact, I'm dedicating 2 segments to it because it's that important. But when you're talking here about how the administration is prioritizing the deportations, there are no deportations. That's what we're trying to explain here. They're not deporting individuals. They're not deporting children. They're not deporting families. It's all a sham. You know what this administration reminds me of? A Western town. You see the old West towns where they have these buildings all along the main street, and they have these glamorous fronts. But when you look at the town from its side view, you see that it's a false front. These are 2- and 3-story, big false fronts on these buildings, and when you look at the back of them, they're made out of tents, or they're these rude, rough cabins. The impression is, of course, that you're going to walk into this magnificent under the facade of this building, and you get in there, and it's nothing but a tent with a dirt floor. That is this administration. A false front and a facade. And frankly, America, I cannot express to you enough how you must begin to awaken yourself and those around you to what is transpiring in our nation. Johnson comes out and says that they're prioritizing those they think deserve deportation. All right. Let me explain something to you. The law is not an optional. The law is not optionally enforced. There is a thing called prosecutorial discretion. And prosecutorial discretion certainly gives law enforcement the opportunity to say, listen, this may be a crime, but it's small enough that it's really not worthy of clogging up the court system, or it wasn't intentional, or whatever the case may be. But when we talk about prosecutorial discretion, we're not talking about, we're talking about whether or not a police officer should give you a ticket for going a few miles an hour over the speed limit. We're talking about whether or not you should be written a littering citation for tossing out a cigarette butt. We're talking about prosecutorial discretion in minor things. Now, I'm the first to tell you that there is a plethora of laws that do not exist or should not exist on the books. But I got to tell you, the Constitution is not to be trifled with, nor is it to be set aside, nor is it to be ignored, nor is your oath of office to be ignored and/or violated. And that is what they're doing. Johnson's excuse for claiming the prosecutorial discretion to deport only those they think deserve deportation is that he says in the past, illegal immigrants from Mexico who had just illegally crossed into the border would often be grabbed and captured, returned, in other words, ejected back over into their home border, only to try again immediately. And now many of them are put into full deportation proceedings. Quite frankly, look, when it comes to this issue of deportation and illegals, I know that this administration is desperate to open the floodgate. But it is up to us. It is up to us as the citizens of this nation to stand up and demand that it cease. We not only have to do that with our own government and our own administration and force them to effectively enforce the law, but we also have a whole nother challenge here. And that is that the corporate or the corporatocracy of our nation is seeking to allow these floodgates to be opened so that they can have cheap labor and basically replace you. Those of you who don't recognize and understand exactly how far down the road we've gone with this had better get on the ball, because their intention is not to bring in intelligent, well-trained, educated engineers and so forth and so on. That's the smokescreen they use. It's the red herring. It's the false front they put out there. It's the facade. But the truth of the matter is they want low-skilled labor to replace you. Why? Well, because when you come here and you earn $6 and $7 or $8 an hour, and you've been living in a place where you earn $300, $500, $1,100 a year, the world's looking pretty rosy. And corporatocracy is interested in only one thing. They don't care about national sovereignty. They don't care about borders. They care about one thing: a good report to their investors on their quarterly reports or their semi-annual or annual report. They're willing to sell our nation down the river and betray us for a good quarterly report. Ladies and gentlemen, you can call it what you want, but make no mistake about it. What this president, this Department of Homeland Security, this Division of Border Security and ICE are doing is treason, because they are betraying the very sacred trust that they've been given by the people of the United States of America to protect us from an invasion. And it is working. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to tackle our second topic, which is the planet's fiscal crisis and the bubble of this fiscal smokescreen is coming to an end. We're going to talk a little bit about why and how that matters to you and what you can do about it. And I'm going to give you some examples of where you can look to watch for trouble. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now.